Fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis, and you're watching Fight Network's Year in Review on MMA. 2012 was chock full of controversy, breakout stars, and of course, a lot of injuries. So stay tuned as we take a look back on the year. And of course, we couldn't do it without our MMA experts, John Ramdeen and Robin Black. Let's take it over to them. And guys, let's talk about top stories this year. Tough to narrow down, but what were some of the biggest ones for you?
Sarah, there were a ton of big stories in 2012. Of course, the return of one of the biggest stars in all of mixed martial arts, George St-Pierre. Ronda Rousey is now the UFC female bantamweight champion. The promotion also crowned their first ever 125-pound flyweight champion, not to mention the retirement of one of the greatest heavyweights of all time in Fedor Emelianenko. So lots of stuff, but we got to talk about the return of George St-Pierre. People said it was impossible. You could not come back from an injury of this nature. Not only did GSP come back, in my opinion, he had a career-defining performance, one of the best of his career against one of the most dangerous fighters he's faced to date.
Yeah, I mean, his performance was fantastic, but we look at why. Why was this guy able to come back? And partly it's the very things that make him a champion. He's almost robotic in his approach. He eats what he's supposed to eat. He trains when he's supposed to train. He competes the way he's supposed to compete. He goes and he seeks out counseling for his mind, all of these things, and he took rehab to heart that way. He did exactly what he needed to do, exactly when he needed to do it, and he came back faster than almost any athlete, elite athlete, comes back from that surgery.
Is this the blueprint for athletes in the future of mixed martial arts, to take things as seriously as humanly possible? And is it realistic? George St-Pierre is the thoroughbred. The UFC, we definitely know, takes care of this guy, but will other fighters be able to follow that same route if they get injured and sustain an injury of this nature?
Well, if we're looking at GSP coming back as one of the big stories of the year, and we look deeper into it, really what it's doing is exactly that. It is showing these guys that, like football, like baseball, and like hockey, if you really want to be an elite level professional athlete, you have to live, breathe it, and sleep it, and do it exactly that way. You know, you don't find an NFL player, you know, drunk in a bar too often, and there's a lot more of them than there are UFC fighters. You don't find them having these sort of fringe lifestyles. They must live and perform a certain way. GSP is one of those guys, and we're going to see a lot more fighters do it in 2013.
The UFC crowned their first ever 125-pound champion. They introduced a tournament format. Demetrius Johnson emerged victorious, taking home that 125-pound title, and I think he looked phenomenal, and I think he proved to a lot of maybe naysayers that the flyweight division is as exciting as the other divisions out there.
Yeah, and I think that's the story here, is that really by introducing the 125 division, the story is the UFC further expanding. That takes us to the women's, which we're going to talk about in just a second as well. But the UFC further expanding is really the story. Will we see 115-pounders? Will we see a super heavyweight division? The success of the flyweights in 2012 sort of paves the way for that.
And you talk about the expansion. UFC President Dana White announced earlier this month that Ronda Rousey, the former Strikeforce champion, is now the UFC female bantamweight champion. I know there's a little bit of controversy saying that she should have had a fight first. We know that she's going to be taking on Liz Carmouche in her first fight for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Is this a good move? Dana White said it was never going to happen, but maybe it's just the fact that mixed martial arts is evolving and people are consuming all types of fighting.
Absolutely. And again, we're looking at this as a story. Well, what's really the story here? And I think the real story is that we have ourselves in Ronda Rousey a big star. I mean, TMZ's writing about her. She's been posing nude in Playboy, and she's in magazines, and she's reaching all of these people that other athletes don't reach. I think she's the story here. The women's division, I mean, the women's division only exists in the UFC because Ronda Rousey's a woman in the UFC. I think the big story here is that we're going out and we're finding these big stars who happen to compete in this sport. And in Ronda Rousey's case, she'd be a big star as a model, as an actor, as, you know, whatever it is she wanted to do. Fortunately for us, she's a fighter.
Another huge story from 2012, of course, the injuries, a factor, but we also have to talk about the UFC for the first time in history canceling an event.
Yeah, and I mean, no, we don't want to end on a sour note, but yes, they were forced to cancel an event, and all of these main events were changed. So how do we look at that as positive for 2013? Well, these guys were able to come back and make bigger and bigger shows, bring better and better main events, learn from that, and really, another big story of this year is that the UFC was able to turn this Fox deal, which looked kind of intimidating and maybe a little bit flawed in the beginning, into something with a ton of momentum. They did that by overcoming these injuries, and they're doing that going into 2013. Looks like a great, great year for the UFC.
We also know it is the end of the Strikeforce promotion. They are set to hold their last event in January of 2013, and it has been a great run for Strikeforce and for some of the naysayers out there who said the guys in Strikeforce couldn't hang with the UFC fighters. Well, I think they're wrong. We got to see a number of guys, and when Daniel Cormier makes his way over to the UFC, I know he's going to make a big impact. Sarah Davis.
You bet he is. Thanks, guys. Now stay with us here on Fight Network for more MMA from 2012, because up next, we're taking you through this year's breakout fighters. Welcome back to our year-end show for the world of MMA from 2012. There are a number of fighters you're going to want to watch in 2013, because this past year, they stepped it up and they showed us why they deserve to be performing on the world's biggest platform for MMA. Check this out.
I want to fight the best guys on the planet at 155. Line them up. I'm not going nowhere.
Benson Henderson. Smooth tops the list because of his 3 appearances inside the octagon, quality of opposition, and his obvious evolution in the sport. After the WEC and its roster was absorbed into the UFC, the former WEC lightweight king would go undefeated in 2011, with huge wins over Mark Bocek, Jim Miller, and Clay Guida. In February of 2012, Henderson would get the chance to fight for the company's 155-pound title when he was paired with one of the sport's most skilled and versatile competitors in Frankie Edgar. After capturing the title in a very close battle, the two met in a rematch 6 months later, with Henderson once again winning a close decision. In December, the 29-year-old would face Nathan Diaz for the undisputed title. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt would dominate almost every minute of the match en route to a decision victory.
First ever UFC flyweight champion!
Demetrius Johnson, after losing a decision to current bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz in October of 2011, the Washington-based fighter would enter the organization's first ever flyweight tournament. The 5'3" powerhouse would go unbeaten in 3 straight fights, and in the process capture the inaugural 125-pound title and throw his hat into the pound-for-pound mix.
I don't see him as an idol. He's an opponent. He's a person. He puts on his pants on one leg at a time just like I do, you know what I'm saying? I just want that belt.
Johnny Hendricks. In December of 2011, Big Rig proved to be a legitimate threat to the welterweight crown with a 12-second KO over consensus top 5 athlete John Fitch. In 2012, the 2-time NCAA Division I champion would cement his status with back-to-back wins over Josh Koscheck and Martin Kampmann, further establishing himself as a viable contender in the 170-pound class.
For more on these breakout stars, let's send it back over to Ramdeen and Robin. And Ramdeen, who tops your list for breakout fighters?
There's so many great fighters that had great performances. In 2012, Rory McDonald comes to mind, but you have to look at the current UFC lightweight champion, Ben Henderson. A stellar year for Smooth, really winning the UFC championship, and in his last fight against Nathan Diaz, putting an exclamation mark on the fact that not only is he the champion, he kicked Nathan Diaz's ass, and nobody kicks Nathan Diaz's ass.
Yeah, it's true. You know, when you're looking at this sport going forward, you know, we're starting to think about next year and what we're going to see. It's athletes like this that make you want to keep watching. You know, we love the way some of these guys match up, but the sport is evolving. These athletes are getting bigger and stronger and more explosive and more skilled, and Benson Henderson is one of these guys. If you love this sport, if you're a fan of this sport and that guy's fighting, you have to see him fight.
What I like about Ben Henderson is you mentioned the fact that he's an athlete, but he's also a martial artist, a guy that is always trying to get better. This is a guy who in his off time still competes in jiu-jitsu competitions. His goal is to be the best fighter in the world in every single realm, the stand-up game, the conditioning realm, as well as the submission game. Ben Henderson is a guy to watch, and I feel that he is a blueprint for a number of fighters moving forward. They're going to tailor their game after Ben Henderson, especially after the performance he had against Nathan Diaz.
Yeah, I can't agree more, really. This wasn't even hard. It wasn't even a close contest. There were a number of fighters who had great breakout performances, great years in different ways, but Ben Henderson by far had the best year.
We got to talk about Demetrius Johnson as well. He captured the UFC's flyweight championship, the inaugural title. This is a guy who trains at one of the best camps at AMC Pancration with the wizard Matt Hume. You know that he's well prepared, but I think that the flyweights bring a different element, and that is the element of speed. And I think when people tune in to see these guys, they just realize how quick, how explosive they are. So you have to give props to Demetrius Johnson, getting himself involved in that tournament, and then he walks away with the flyweight title.
Yeah, and the big performance of the year for him was that title fight. That was an incredible, incredible 25 minutes, and he owned that fight. Just looked phenomenal. The one thing, yes, he had one of the great performances of the year, but this is one of the smallest divisions in the world, so we're going to have to see if next year he can be that great of a fighter.
We have to talk about Johnny Hendricks, too. We also saw on the feature, yes, at the end of 2012, he knocked out John Fitch, and 2011. 2012, he had a huge year, and I am very surprised that he's not one of the front runners to get that next crack at George St-Pierre. I understand it's all about selling the fight. Nick Diaz does a phenomenal job of doing that. But when you're talking about an athlete, a decorated, this guy is a two-time national wrestling champion. This guy has so many accolades, and he's explosive, and he knocks guys out. I think Johnny Hendricks, you know, you talk about maybe 8 months ago, Johnny Hendricks really wasn't considered as a front runner, but you know, you have a couple of great performances, especially knockout performances, and your name is now in the mix.
Yeah, and a fantastic year for him. That's undeniable as well. Let's look at a couple other people. You know, if John Pollock was standing right here, he'd say, what makes a great performance? You know, the breakout of Chael Sonnen as a star. He lost some fights, but he became a star, a television star on the Fox network. Ronda Rousey, a star all over the world. If Pollock was here, he'd be talking about those guys. You also got to consider, you know, people who maybe didn't fight that much. Ryan Jimmo was only in there 6 or 7 seconds, but what a performance. Guys like that. So many great athletes, so many great performances this year.
And we're also talking about the UFC. You look at Bellator, and they have had a number of fighters, especially Andrei Koreshkov, who had a great knockout over Mario Saromskis. So 2012 has produced a ton of great fighters, and maybe some of the best that we've seen. And moving forward, we know we're just going to see more great fights.
Oh, yeah. These are the people to watch for 2013, right?
You're correct.
All right. Thanks, guys. On Fight Network, we aired more live MMA cards this year than we ever have in the past. So don't miss our look back on all these fights after this next break. You're watching the MMA edition of Fight Network's Year in Review. And as I recall, we had a number of weekends in 2012 when we brought you live MMA cards from around the world. So now let's check them out.
It was a major year for Fight Network live events as we brought you some of the most exciting action and some of the biggest fights in the mixed martial arts world. UK-based promotion Bama had a bit of an up and down 2012. The company only managed to hold 3 events and lost promotional standouts Jimmy Manuwa and Tom Kong Watson to the UFC. Both men have been seen regularly by Fight Network fans over the years, lighting up the competition on the English regional scene. The company did, however, manage to sign a major television deal with UK station Channel 5 to bring MMA into the British mainstream. Rival promotion Cage Warriors FC had a landmark year, hosting 12 events across the globe. For the first time in the company's history, Cage Warriors held shows in countries such as Ukraine, Lebanon, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. In addition, the company also crowned 4 new champions, ranging from featherweight to heavyweight. 2012 was also a big year for Upstart Promotions, as the World Series of Fighting held its inaugural event live on Fight Network. The event proved to be a success for all involved and featured a host of notable UFC veterans returning to glory.
Inverted shot in the eye. Oh, man, that is it.
Possibly the biggest event witnessed by Fight Network viewers, however, was the retirement of Pride legend Fedor Emelianenko. After years of ruling the sport's highest level, the last emperor decided to call it a career following a KO win over former UFC standout Pedro Rizzo under the M1 banner.
He's bombing him. Low kick and big right, and Rizzo is down!
is all Fedor Emelianenko.
From show fights to Super Fight League and everything in between, 2012 proved to be a memorable year for the station as we continue to bring our fans the best in international mixed martial arts.
So let's hear from Ramdean and Robin again. And guys, Fedor's last fight live on Fight Network is a huge highlight for me.
Oh, absolutely. What's amazing about it is people said that Fedor Emelianenko didn't have it. It was time for him to retire. But this fight with Pedro Rizzo proved, I think, to a lot of the naysayers that he shouldn't be going anywhere. The last Russian emperor, still at the top of his game, still explosive, still entertaining, and he always brings it. It is a shame that he is still not fighting. However, I do feel that retirement might not be fully, you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, John. And first of all, what people said that Fedor should hang it up? Like, who would say that?
Aren't you one of
Like,
those guys?
look, who? Yeah, I know. I've never always, or I haven't always been the biggest Fedor supporter, you know. But man, that performance was the best, really one of the best in years for him. He was so quick. His striking was so sharp. He seemed faster, more explosive, more in the zone than ever. And when you perform that well, you know, maybe it isn't the end for Fedor. We may see him again this year.
We also have to take a look at the World Series of Fighting, which we got a chance to see live right here on Fight Network. Andrei Arlovsky on this card, Anthony Rumble Johnson on this card, Miguel Torres on this card. I know it looks promising for 2013. I know they haven't nailed anything down, but when your card is that good, you have to keep it going, right?
For sure, and I think we will see it keep going. And it's great to see a brand new promotion be able to hit it hard like that from the beginning. For my money, I just love the fact that we were able to show that, able to show Fedor's last fight, able to show all of these great live events. You've been here for 6 years. I've been here for 3 years. And to see this network evolve, you know, we're a 24-hour combat sports station. And now you can tune in and see live fights from around the world. That's an exciting thing, and we're all very proud of that.
We also got to see Bama live, and one of the biggest prospects coming out of Europe, Jimmy Manuwa. We saw what he did when he got to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, just dismantling Kyle Kingsbury. So we know that it's a proving ground, a breeding ground for superstars, so tune in. That's all I have to say about it, Sarah.
Well, we all love the live cards, right? Doesn't get better than that. Thanks, guys. So we've barely touched the surface on Canada's best MMA stars. So after this break, find out what Ramdean and Robin have to say about the Canucks making a difference in 2012. Welcome back to Fight Network's Year in Review on MMA. Looking back on 2012, there's a number of Canadians who raised their rankings in the world and also a few who retired. For more on our crazy Canuck fighters, let's hear from Ramdean and Robin. And guys, which Canadians really made an impact for you this year?
Well, Sarah, we started with George St-Pierre, so we have to finish with George St-Pierre. I think he has definitely cemented his status as the number 2 or 3 pound-for-pound fighter in the world with that performance against Carlos Condit. He came back from injury. We didn't know if he would look as good, as explosive. Not only did he look as good and as explosive, he exceeded expectations. He came back from that head kick knockdown by Condit. He also was on his back. Condit really tried to take it to him. He persevered and proved what being a real champion is all about.
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised we've only talked about him twice in this show, because to be honest, since Wayne Gretzky, this is as dominant an athlete as we've had in this country. And George St-Pierre really, not only, like you mentioned, not only continued his dominance, but had that giant hiccup that could be career-ending and looked even better.
You have to remember, Sidney Crosby is now the new Wayne Gretzky. I think he's as dominant. No? You're not sold on that?
Not so.
We also have to talk about George St-Pierre's kind of his prodigy, Rory McDonald, a guy that's really tearing up the ranks in the welterweight division. He continues to look very impressive, especially that last fight against BJ Penn. We know BJ Penn's a lightweight, but he is a gamer, and Rory simply had zero problems dealing with anything that BJ brought to the table.
Well, this is a topic about the best Canadian performers, and both of these two guys would be on the best worldwide performers. Rory definitely included. So, yes, this is a conversation about Canadians, but man, if we were in Europe, if we were in Australia, if we were in Mexico, Rory McDonald is one of the best performers of the year. He's powerful. He's mentally like unbreakable and terrifying. He's skilled everywhere. And 2013, if GSP wasn't the champion or were to get injured in some way or to retire for some reason, Rory McDonald would be the next guy.
Okay, maybe a guy that's not known in the global landscape of mixed martial arts as a top performer, but one of the top Canadians, in my opinion, has to be the rugged East Coast fighter, TJ Grant. Really finding at home at 155 pounds, and I think we're going to see some big things from him in 2013.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is there's so many fighters, and they're all training really hard, and they're all learning the game, but some of them are able to make those strides better than others, and TJ Grant is one of those for this year. And when wrapping up, to wrap up 2012, talking about MMA, Mark Hominick retiring, he's one of the greatest fighters that Canada has ever produced, one of the great ambassadors for the sport, and seeing that guy finish off his career, really, he started it right here on Fight Network with TKO, and to see it finish off, it's sad in some ways, but I'm excited for the guy. You know, second kid on the way, and he's going to have a great career, whether it's in broadcasting, coaching, managing, whatever he wants.
Well, we got to see him, like you mentioned, perform at TKO, Affliction, the UFC, the WEC. So he has his fingerprints all over the global landscape of mixed martial arts. And the reason why people love seeing Mark Hominick fight is because, Sarah, he brings it each and every time. Even if he ends up on the losing end of things, he comes to entertain, and we know we get our money's worth.
Yeah, and we wish him well.
Oh, absolutely. He's fiery.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks, guys. And thank you for joining us as we took a look back on how MMA filled our appetites in 2012. Of course, 2013 has a whole lot to offer, and we look forward to bringing you all the latest from the world of MMA in the new year.